Hey, welcome to another episode of the When We're Not Hustling After Party. My name is Emily Foster. I'm the producer and the one that asks you to like, subscribe, follow us, leave us a comment.
I'm Jessie Sage. I'm the host of the show, and we have Milk with us today. Milk, do you want to introduce yourself?
I am Melissa Milk. I am a community member of the kink scene, neurodivergent scene here in Pittsburgh, originally from Philadelphia and New Jersey.
Milk is an awesome rigger. So if you want to be tied up and you're in Pittsburgh, or you can get to Pittsburgh, I highly suggest it.
Thank you.
We are talking, we're talking about Allie Awesome today, and I loved their interview. It was so heartfelt and so sweet. So I've been friends with Allie. I've seen Allie at a lot of different conventions. We followed each other on Twitter for a while, and I knew that they got sick because they got sick right after PJ had cancer and chemo. And I knew that the two of them had been like talking a little bit about what that experience is like to be that sick. I'm like trying to think of how to say it, but to kind of lose your life to illness, which is what happened to both of them. Yeah. And it's amazing to see both of them like thriving again. But I didn't know because it was more because I haven't been through something like that except for as a partner. Like PJ talked to her a lot more. And so I didn't know her story really. And it was really like amazing to hear how hard things got for her and like what it took to pull herself out of that.
Yeah, it was hearing the part of the conversation where she really went into how sick she was and how alone she was initially. And it immediately brought to mind like we, as sex workers, as people who are neurodivergent, as kinksters, like you think of having this community, and I'm like immediately having this thought where I'm like, oh my god, I hope that there was community that rushed up around her, and then she immediately started to talk about like how she found ways to connect with like her community and build community for other people, and I'm like, that's what I love about the people that I interact with every day from these like alt communities is they really rush up around each other.
Yeah. I was struck by, I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I was struck by how, honestly, she talked about like what that felt like to be alone with a body that didn't function.
As somebody who I'm like a family caregiver because I have a brother who's a quadriplegic, but like who's a caregiver and has never, I have some mild chronic illness, but not anything like that. It's like you experience a lot of like from the side, like someone going through those things. And I'm sure you did with PJ too, but like it's never the same as hearing someone talk about like my everything changed.
Right.
Everything I knew about myself was not the same.
Definitely had a medical accident that shifted my entire experience of my body. And it was a really heavy episode for me. I'm going to be honest. I'm a judgy little bitch, it turns out. Like, I really think I'm open-minded, and then I come into these and I'm like, horses, isn't that like for rich girls? Like, I found that, I'm like, well, there's another one of those thoughts. I'm like, okay, let's find out. It's like, no, this isn't a rich horse girl. So from having that internal thought to being like, yeah, there's a crushing loneliness and your body leaving you. I think it is losing your life to illness. I think in a lot, like when I think of the person that I was before that first of many surgeries, that person doesn't exist anymore. She's dead for all intents and purposes. The body that she lived in doesn't exist anymore in the mind. And I do think there's some sort of spirit, and of course there's some continuity there, but
Mm-hmm.
A lot of who we are is ego. My ego is completely changed, which is a
Yeah.
huge statement to make. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's,
Mm-hmm.
like when I think of the me and the I, it is a different person now. And that,
Yeah.
I'm going on a little bit now, but yeah, Allie really touched on that deep, deep loneliness that partially starts physically because people
Mm-hmm.
just can't be around you.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't. You're in the
Yeah.
hospital, you're in
Right.
recovery, and there's only so much you can do. And
Mm-hmm.
um, opiates are our best answer. And when you're first home, you're just knocked out on
Yeah.
legal heroin for quite some time. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
it's isolating in very real ways,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also isolating because you don't even know who you are. And it's really hard to relate to people when you're
Yeah.
like, I don't know who you're talking to anymore.
Yeah.
You're over
Mm-hmm.
here like, Emily, I missed you. And I'm like, who?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's I don't know. I don't really have a
Yeah.
point here. I'm just kind of, just kind of going on about it. But yeah, yeah, so many different layers of loneliness and shifting
Mm-hmm.
changes and
Yeah.
those caregiving people around you. I mean, wow. That's why we're here. For me, it
Yeah.
was my husband. It was you for PJ. It was and
Yeah.
you for it sounds like your brother and other people in your life. And I also have been a caregiver, but receiving that is it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
It's humbling, and you find yourself resenting someone that you love and need and is doing everything for you, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to handle that,
Yeah.
like because you're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you get to just walk around and
Mm-hmm.
help me.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And you're like,
I
wait a minute, I
found
definitely need that help. I definitely like it. What is this shit? Like,
I found like as a caregiver, like feeling a lot of guilt as somebody who's like had a body that felt the same and had the same
mm,
like wants and
mm,
needs, and then having a partner who's like, I remember like having to like lift their legs into bed because they weren't strong enough to like bring them into bed. Remember we tried to go to the mall, like, okay, let's just do something that's a little bit normal. And like realizing that there wasn't enough places to sit in a mall because they couldn't walk from one store to the other without being tired, and they were like, I can't do
can't
this,
make it
like,
between benches. Yeah, yeah,
no, can't make it between
yeah,
benches. Why is there no places to sit in this like mall? And feeling that does, it like changes a relationship a lot. And I think that
yeah.
and I've only experienced that from, you know a side of somebody who also wasn't feeling that inside of their body, so I
Mm,
think that yeah, I don't know. But this story about, okay, first the story about ketamine and then the story about horses was like the
yeah,
the horse thing was so amazing. Like I didn't know that that's what I didn't know anything about equine therapy actually. But that whole bit about her laying on the horse and the horse forcing her to like exhale pain out of her body was beautiful.
Yeah,
yeah,
she is very good at expressing herself. And like, I also know people who are like what you would define as like horse girls. Like, even if they're like men, like people who just love horses. And like,
yeah.
I've been around horses and I've ridden horses, but like never in the way that she described, and like
Mhm.
would not have made those connections, but they seem so obvious, like when she
Mhm.
talks
Right.
about them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
right.
had a little actually she's since passed on, and I'm totally not gonna cry talking about her, but I had a little pit bull friend who was our I'm divorced from my daughter's father, and the three of us are she's an adult, and the three of us all live separately, but shared the care of this little pit bull. She was mostly my
Mhm.
ex-husband's, but that little sweet pea came in and was a huge part of my recovery. Like, wanted to lay on my legs and make
Oh.
sure I was okay. And when she was talking about that experience with animal, and I'm not a big animal person. Like, I love them, they love me. I'm the person you call if there's a hurt one. I come find it and gather it up and help it get where it needs to go. But I'm not like I don't need to have them, you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're amazing and kind of totally necessary. And if you're recovering from something,
Hmm.
strongly recommend you check it out. That breathing, like where they're just
Yeah.
like, hey, seems like you're getting caught up in your head and you need to breathe.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I found out that they do that not that far from my house for autistic kids. And
Wow.
I was thinking, like, after talking to her, like, that would be really cool to take my son to, because maybe I don't know what that would look like for him. I have no idea,
Right.
but they do.
Yeah, they
So,
know.
yeah. Like,
They
I don't
know, and
know
your
how
kid
he
knows if
would
he likes it or
interact
not.
with
I
a
mean, that's
horse,
pretty
but
easy.
yeah. But that
I've
seems, oh, go ahead.
Anybody that I've ever heard do any kind of horse therapy has benefited from it.
Yeah.
Horses are like incredibly intuitive animals,
Hmm.
and yeah, like rave reviews across. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about like experiencing any kind of therapy with a horse.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Yeah.
love horses. They're sweet.
You
They're
know, it's
good.
interesting. So I'm writing an article right now for my column next week, and I'm talking to therapists who uh, therapists, and then also like social workers and siblings, like caretaking siblings of disabled adults, who wish that they could connect in an above board way with sex workers, to meet
Mm.
like those needs of their siblings or their clients or whatever. But I was thinking, as you guys were talking, about all of the ways that, almost kind of going back to the last episode that we were talking about, all the things that we believe are like okay and sanctioned, and then all of these other possibilities for healing and for wholeness that we totally
Yeah.
disregard, and don't think to offer people. So I have speech and occupational therapists in my house all the time, but it took me saying something about like equine therapy for somebody to be like, oh yeah, that exists like 20 minutes down the road. And I was like, why have I never heard
Right,
this before? And
right.
I'm not blaming them, but because like we just don't like offer things
Right.
that aren't um the standard
Traditional. Yeah,
traditional.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even like,
Yeah.
and even equine therapy being like something that's above board, and sex work being something that is like hush hush. We don't really talk
Right.
about it. Is like thinking of her talking about being so physically close to the horse,
Mm-hmm.
and then thinking
Mm-hmm.
about how like a lot of the therapies that are practiced now are like they're verbal, or they're
Right.
like you're interacting with
Hmm.
tools and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily physically interacting
Right.
with another human person. Like we need touch so much,
So
whether it be
much.
from animals or people, from like other living
Mm-hmm.
beings.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And that's like completely anathema to talk therapy. You're not allowed to do that in talk therapy. And now so
Yeah,
much
No.
of talk therapy has gone to virtual sessions that you're not even in the same room with a person.
I
yeah.
mean,
And you
just
think about like,
societally, we
yeah.
don't do that.
Hmm.
Like, I don't, I don't, we've talked about this before. I don't know what my flavor of neurodivergence is, but I'm not neurotypical. Um, we'll get around to diagnoses when there's time and money. Um, I really like my touch to be prescribed. I like it to be very clearly defined when it's allowed
Hmm.
and not.
Hmm.
And when I'm caring for children, the poor things, there really reaches a point where I'm like, okay, you're old enough now. Like, stop climbing on me and
Yeah.
touching me. And I've been accused of being a touchy person before when people are experiencing grief or difficulties, where
Mm.
there's like, I understand death. I've been around way more than I can imagine. I should be a death doula
Yeah.
at this point. I know that
Hmm.
touch is part of this. Like,
Yeah.
that's just a fact, you know. And I'm over here in this very clinical space of just like, hey, you need a hand on your arm right now. Like,
Hmm.
oh,
Hmm.
you know, you're a little touchy. I'm like, I just saw no one else was touching you, is
Yeah.
usually my answer in those spaces. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, this
Mm-hmm.
kind of seems like a time when you might
You
need
need
it.
it. Yeah.
And the like surprise in humans from that, of like, oh,
Yeah. Do you
well,
think that they
well,
usually
yeah, I
find
guess
that
I
that
do
is what
need
they
that.
wanted? Yeah.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
it usually ends up with me hugging a stranger or, like
Yeah.
in that space, but it's our society is so anti that.
Mhm.
There's some amazing Asian country. There's here's Emily revealing her racism again. I think that it's South Korea, but I read a lot of things, so it could be Japan, it could be China, but there's something called skinship, and the kids are actually taught to just touch each other.
Mm.
There's a part of school
Mhm.
where kids just hang out and kind of
Oh,
cuddle
yeah.
puddle and hold
Hmm.
hands, and it's not about boy or girl, and it's not about
Right.
anything. It's about skinship. We're having
Yeah.
skinship now. Now
Right.
it's about this part of life has this, and
Hmm.
that's missing.
Right.
It's
Right.
I agree.
missing
Right.
all over America. Like,
I think a lot of people get caught up in the notion of consent when it comes to
mm,
touch. And
Hmm.
it's like it's so easy to ask for consent
Oh,
though.
yeah.
yes,
Right.
And to
yes,
stop something or revoke consent if it's not what you want. Like
Right.
that to think of consent even when you're just like want to give someone relief from grief.
Hmm.
Like
yeah,
it's really easy to be like, okay, can I touch you? And then if they don't want it anymore, like to just step away.
Right.
And like the thread for me between the conversation that you had in the podcast and like what you were just saying about like being around death a lot is like you know, ego death is akin to physical death.
Hmm.
And like, the rare person might not need like the relief of touch and the like the co-breathing and the sharing of nervous
Hmm.
systems. But like
Hmm.
I feel like that's the small percentage. Like
Yeah.
even any kind of like growth or death or shift of perception,
Hmm.
like the physical interaction
Yeah.
really helps to like regulate our nervous systems and carry us through those experiences or like
Right.
reliving them.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really real. Babies need that.
Oh, yeah.
They don't
Hmm.
know how to breathe or warm themselves. You have to
Hmm.
just teach them that. And
Yeah.
that, you're right. I mean, if something in our lives is shifting to the point of that no longer being with us, it's essentially dying. And then
Hmm.
we're brand new and we don't know who we
Hmm.
are. We need regulation again.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's we don't treat touch like it's necessary. And I think that's a
Hmm.
little criminal. And by we, I mean
Hmm.
America. Like that's
Yeah.
really
Right.
that seems to be a us thing.
We've made a really big effort with our son because he didn't understand, like, it was very difficult to teach him how to like hug, and
Mm, mhm,
that was something that we had to do. Like, he just didn't get like what we were doing, and
mm,
so like every night we had a routine for years where we were like, okay, say good night daddy, and like give them a hug, and like we're trying to like do that, and then we go through this whole routine, and for I would say 2 years, I had to like take their hands and like put them over to like
mhm.
show him how to do it. And he'd kind of like reluctantly do it. But I thought it was both of us thought it was important that he like learn to like accept touch like that. Like, and because he
Right.
didn't know how to ask for it. And now all the time he'll come to me and he'll be like, hugs, hugs. And he'll like put his arms around me. And he, like, it took a while to like, I think for him to first like understand what the point was,
Mhm.
and then to like be comfortable with like doing it. Now like I'll just be walking around now and he'll like come and grab my waist and be like, hugs, hugs.
Love that. Love that.
So,
Yeah.
First of all, I think he's the
Yeah.
coolest kid. And also just like you understanding that even though he didn't get it or he wasn't initiating it, at some point he might be yearning a feeling that
yeah.
like touching someone will give him. And if you hadn't taken him through that practice, he would not understand how to give himself that sensation.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because he has like he'll do things like he bites his hand. Like when he wants like a sensation, he'll like do those sorts of things. And I want to give him like other ways to do it. And so we've spent like, just because he doesn't know how to initiate or ask for that doesn't mean that he's not going to want that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. That whole thing about touch, I think, is really, really important. And I've worked with adults who don't know. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons that we thought it was important, but like I've worked with a lot of adults who don't know how to like give or receive touch, who like want it so badly,
So badly.
but
Yeah.
don't know what that looks like or how to get it or what the and I think that for a lot of adults, and I, as a sex worker, I'll say that like for a lot of adults, especially a lot of like people socialized as men, where like the only way that they could have any sort of like physical interaction is through people they're having sex with, they often ask for sex when what they want is touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that and maybe don't even necessarily want sex. Like I have a client who's a longtime regular. I like have so much like love and affection for him. He's a lovely person. But he was talking to me recently and he was like, I wish I could book a provider and just cuddle. And I was like, well, you can totally
Yeah.
do that. Like you, we don't, and I've even
Yeah.
said to him since that conversation, like, I will be in town. We could get together. We don't have to have sex if you don't want to. Um, but he said, and I said to him, well, why don't you do that? There'd be lots of people who are open to it. And what he said is, well, because I don't know then how to get that like after cuddle, like after sex cuddle feeling when like walls go down and you're in like a space. And he's like, I don't actually want to have the sex, but I want that part of it. And if you just walk in as strangers, like it's hard to get to that point without the like sex part. And I understand what he is saying. But then I was like, well, you already know me. So like if you would like to just cuddle, we could just cuddle. And he's like, oh, that's really nice. But that points to something I think that's really important, which is like if you don't learn how to get your like needs met just for companionship or touch or um uh kindness. Kindness is kind of what I'm
Yeah.
thinking about. And it pushes you into asking for things that you don't actually want. I'm not saying
Mhm.
people don't legitimately want sex. Like people want sex too, but like there's a lot of times when people are asking for sex when actually what they want is something else.
Yeah. And like it's funny, like even when you said what he said to you about like I don't know how to get the same openness
Mm-hmm.
after, and I'm like, as somebody who like has done kink and sex work, like I'm like, I could teach you like easily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We could just get into bed, and I promise we could probably cultivate that sensation
Yeah.
super easily. And you
Right.
wouldn't know unless I was like, no, I could do that for you. Like,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I think that's lovely. I think like thinking like to me as a provider, I was like, how do I like it got me thinking about like how do we talk about providing those sorts of like things for the people that want them you
and I
know
also like when I'm teaching people about things like rope bondage, shibari, or kink, I try to be very diverse in telling people that you can get different sensations, you can be okay
mhm,
with different things, you can consent to something because you think that's what you want, and then realize like maybe there's a part of it that you like, and
mhm.
you only want, and it's perfectly fine to like move forward in that practice
Yeah.
once you figure those things out and be like, well, I know other people do rope because they want to be like super restricted and like
Mhm,
submissive, but I like to do rope because like it's quiet inside myself, so I don't really want it to hurt. And like
mhm, mhm.
people can give you, if they know what they're doing, like just
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's kind of a theme that's coming out of what all of us are saying is like how a skill that people could really benefit from is identifying what you want and like going to people and asking for those experiences.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or just
Well,
communicating until you've like maybe a light bulb goes on for like one or
mhm,
the other person.
right.
Yeah, have
Well,
some curiosity for your
mhm,
own needs, right? Like,
mhm, yeah.
and broaden the scope of what those might be.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm,
it's
yeah.
okay to want parts of stuff.
Well,
That's
even going
okay.
back to what the three of us were talking about in the last after party with hitchhiking, like that may require trying some stuff. You know, like for him, it
It may require
required,
failing.
yeah, for him, it required having sex with a bunch of sex workers and realizing, like, okay, the sex is fine, but
Yeah,
that's not actually why I'm here. I want the
that's
part
not what I'm looking
after.
for. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
that's good self-knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us for that after party and its exciting ending. Join us for the next one, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. This is Emily Foster signing off.